Hello, my name is Kayla Wade and I am the Behavior and Training Coordinator at the Humane Society of Charlotte. Today I will be presenting a PowerPoint on animal behavior with topics geared towards those animals that live in shelters. The purpose of this presentation is to give you foundational knowledge on canine and feline communication and behavior to better prepare you for the interactions you'll be having with HSC's animals. With this knowledge under your belt, the goal would be to increase safety, lower risk of injury, and ensure that our HSC family, furry and otherwise, are confident and secure. In short, we'll be going over the following topics: canine body language, defensive animal handling, dog assessments, common shelter behavioral issues, how to manage those behaviors to prevent them from happening, and feline behavior and handling. While all this information may not be relevant to your specific position, feel free to skip over irrelevant parts. First, we'll talk about canine body language. Dog body language is defined as how dogs primarily communicate with one another and with people. They'll even speak to other animals, such as cats, in the same mannerisms. When they communicate, it reveals their state of mind, feelings, and next actions. It will give you good insight on how a continued interaction with them will go based on your response to their signals. For example, lip licking is a sign of stress in dogs and may indicate that they need a break from whatever's causing them stress. On the next slide, we'll be watching a short video on common body language signals and what they mean. Of course, there are lots of things dogs do to talk with us that may not be extensively covered in this video, but as you gain hands-on experience with canines, you'll learn to be able to spot those subtle cues that they give us. Sometimes dogs, or even cats, can show signs of aggression and/or defensiveness towards other people or animals. This is primarily rooted in fear, but regardless, they can still act defensively towards ourselves when they feel threatened. Defensive animal handling is when you take steps and methods to mitigate risk of injury towards yourself. Generally, the first step is to create distance through various methods, a few of those which will be mentioned in the slide next. Then you want to make sure the animal is confined and seek assistance from a second person. Knowing the mindset behind these actions can help remind you that these animals are most likely just afraid and want space and do not want to escalate to bodily harm. If you comply and respect their wishes, you'll be able to escape these situations. If you're in a pickle and an animal is becoming too rowdy for you to handle and you need to exit a situation, below we'll talk about some methods of getting away from an animal quickly and efficiently. As demonstrated with this beautiful pug in the top right corner, treat bombs/treat scattering is when you take a handful of treats and toss it in the dog's direction. This acts as a good distraction as most animals are very food motivated or will at least be curious about what you've thrown. When they're looking the other way, you can make a swift exit. Using the leash attached as a distraction is also an option. Many dogs love to tug, so if you see one about to engage in some less than ideal behavior, offering their own leash as a tug toy can redirect their focus onto something more appropriate. This is especially useful if you don't have any other toys on hand. If needed, you can also use the leash to tether a dog onto a fence post or chain link fence by tying it in a knot or placing the handle loop around the top of a fence post. This works great in a pinch if you need to ensure this dog is contained while you assist with something else or need to leave the area. And of course, always call for help if you feel unsafe. Luckily, HSC always has staff and volunteers in all areas, indoor and outdoor, that are within hearing distance that can assist you. Another important practice is the act of staying prepared by having a certain set of tools on you at all times. At the bare minimum, having a pocket full of treats and a small stuffed squeaky toy can get you out of many sticky situations. No matter what issue you're facing, redirecting a dog's attention to a food reward or an intriguing toy is a useful ability to have. Having a treat pouch can keep all these items contained in an easily accessible manner. Having a slip lead and/or clip leash on you can also be useful in case your leash breaks or you need an extra one, but it's not 100% necessary at all times. Before you have an interaction with the dog, you should assess their behavior in the kennel. The first step is to observe the dog in front of you, asking yourself questions like if they're jumping up, If they're hiding or if they're growling are important things to note before you continue the interaction. Next, you should always read their kennel card in full. Check to make sure they're walk approved, see if they prefer treats or toys, and see if they have any handling sensitivities are a couple things that you should look out for. Lastly, you should always make sure you're prepared to interact with this animal. If they have any special requests on their card, such as needing a harness or needing certain toys or treats to go on walks, make sure you have those things before you take the animal out of their kennel. When it comes to physically handling a dog, there is a right way and a wrong way to do things. Ideally, you would never touch or handle any dog that does not want you to. If they approach you and stand by you, giving a few calm and slow pets on the chest or back can help test the waters for how they're feeling. If they lean into it, paw, or whine at you when you stop, those are indicators that they want you to continue that interaction. If they walk away or ignore you, that may be a sign that while they tolerated it, they did not necessarily enjoy it. On the next slide, you'll watch a quick video that explains the proper way of handling a dog. As an example, the way this woman is holding this dog is the opposite of what you should do. Next, we're going to talk over common behavioral issues that you'll see exhibited by canines in a shelter environment. These may include poor leash manners, dogs who are jumpy and or mouthy, dogs with handling and touch sensitivities, fearful dogs who have risk of becoming flight and bite risk, door dashing and resource guarding, and reactivity towards other people and or dogs. We'll talk about what each of these mean and how to prevent them from happening as much as possible to ensure a positive experience with our animals. First, we'll talk about poor leash manners. This can include pulling, thrashing, trying to back out of the leash, and freezing and refusing to move. Generally, we try to use anti-pull equipment such as easy walk harnesses. We do not use aversive equipment such as prong collars and or choke chains as a few examples. To ensure an animal cannot get out of their harness enclosure, make sure to clip the leash to the collar and harness through the front loops to prevent escape. Next, we'll talk about dogs who are jumpy and or mouthy. Jumpy mouthy dogs are dogs who excessively jump up and or place their open mouth on a person's body. The intensity of this can vary from dogs who press down lightly with their mouths and only jump a few times, to dogs who don't have a bite inhibition and can cause punctures, and dogs who can knock people over due to their size. Generally, when we encounter dogs who are jumpy mouthy, we like to recommend that you try to redirect them with toys and treats to get their attention on something else other than you. When they are doing this behavior, the best thing to do is ignore them and stand like a tree, as even bad attention such as pushing them down and saying no can be rewarding for them and be considered play. On the opposite end, we will have dogs who will be very shy and avoid interacting with you. The first thing we want to talk about is what you should do when you encounter these types of animals. First, you should position yourself at your side to appear less intimidating. Move slowly and offer and toss some treats instead of trying to give it from your hand. Offer your hand loose at your side to have an open invitation if they would like to come sniff you. If you need to leash them up, do so with as little physical contact as possible. Now, what you should not do is give direct eye contact and stare at them, as this can appear very intimidating. Touch them if not necessary, as generally these dogs want to avoid touch. Pick them up, as that feels very insecure and unsafe for them. Do not extend your hand into their space, as that is an intrusion of their personal space, and generally they do not appreciate that. And of course, do not force contact in any way unless absolutely necessary. In conjunction with shy dogs, some are so fearful that they may exhibit fear aggression. You'll see some signs of that below in this picture. Generally, the animal will hold their body weight low and back. Dogs giving these displays are not necessarily bad dogs. They're just asking for space the only way that they know how. If you see any of these signals from a dog, the best course of action is to back up slowly, as moving fast could trigger them. If you're not sure what to do, discontinue the interaction and ask for help. Door dashing is when a dog attempts to rush past you when you try to retrieve them from the kennel. Door dashing is a behavior that's not as intense or threatening, but fairly common, as a dog's natural instinct is to walk through an open door or kennel. Some will just try to walk past, while more extreme cases will try and bolt/wiggle past you as soon as you open the kennel door. Ways to prevent this behavior is tossing treats to the back to distract them, or body blocking their bodies from exiting the kennel while you stand in front. When you're putting an animal back into a kennel, instead of going inside with them, unleash them at the kennel door and lead them in by the collar. Next on the list is resource guarding. Resource guarding is when an animal shows defensiveness over a perceived valuable item or space. Popular items could include food, toys, and sometimes even people. The way to manage this when you're in a shelter: if you're in a playgroup with multiple dogs, it's always advised to pick up toys and/or treats on the ground before you start, as many dogs will fight over food. When you need to pick up a food bowl from an animal that you know is a resource guarder, using the guillotine to lock them inside or outside while you pick up the bowl is advised. You can also distract the animal with tossing treats in the opposite direction while you go to retrieve the item that they perceive as valuable. Lastly, we'll talk about reactivity. Reactivity is when an animal shows an abnormal response to a certain trigger. Generally, this will present as barking and lunging as a trigger comes within sight. You'll also notice that the animal will generally be behind a barrier, such as a leash or a fence. The triggers can vary, but most often will be other dogs, wild animals, people, or motor vehicles such as cars or bikes. Reactivity can occur for a variety of reasons unique to each case, and while it may appear aggressive, it is often out of fear or excitement. When you come across an animal that has experienced reactivity, the best course of action is to create distance with that trigger. That might mean walking away or walking across the street to get away from it. If an animal is exhibiting a behavioral concern, they will sometimes have a training plan posted on their kennel. This usually depends on the severity of the issue. Training plans are instructions on how to modify a dog's problematic behavior. This may either be written on the animal's kennel card or posted on their kennel door. These can be done by staff and volunteers and are always encouraged. All of our training plans are force-free and LIMA methods only. LIMA stands for least intrusive, minimally aversive. Now, I'll briefly go over cat behavior and communication. As with dogs, it's how they communicate to humans and other cats. It reveals how they're feeling, their state of mind, and what they may do next. On the next slide will be a brief video on cat body language so you know what to expect when you see certain behaviors. One thing worth mentioning is that cats are generally way more subtle and are not as always obvious as a dog's communication may seem, so make sure you keep your eyes peeled when observing a cat's behavior. Now, when it comes to handling any feline, there's a few things you should always keep in mind. When you want to pet a cat, you should aim for gentle strokes on the shoulders, side of head, and neck. When you need to pick up a cat, you should support the belly and hindquarters as you lift them up. If absolutely necessary, you can hold their scruff and support their rear end as you pick them up and down, but that should be reserved for extreme cases as it can be uncomfortable for some cats. What you shouldn't do is give direct eye contact with a cat or stare at them, as this can appear quite intimidating. You should not hug or clutch a cat as it makes them feel very uncomfortable. And if you don't need to pick up a cat, you should not do so, as they don't generally like to be picked up if not necessary. And that concludes the presentation. To sum everything up, preparation is key. Having the proper tools on you will definitely come in handy, and information is power. The more you are informed, the better you can prepare for any animal's behavior. And of course, don't feel the need to be a hero and keep things to yourself. Everyone on site is always willing to lend a helping hand if they're available, so never hesitate to speak up and ask for help. If you need supplemental information, feel free to check out the additional and more extensive webinars, articles, and more on this additional help slide. If you ever have any questions or concerns about anything regarding behavior, please reach out to the Behavior and Training team or your supervisor. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch this introduction into animal behavior.